Giving a speech in Alexandra today, Bonang Mohale, the Chief Executive of Business Leadership South Africa, began a fight back against the hashtag White Monopoly Capital campaign with a clear message, hashtag business believe in South Africa. He joins us now to pack this and further. A very good afternoon to you, Bonang. Thank you so much for making time for us. Well, you're fighting White Monopoly Capital. You want to get rid of that hashtag, basically.
Yeah, Mashud Masutu, thank you so much for having me. It's very hurtful and not useful that after partnering with government for so many years, especially business having defied a sitting president, P.W. Botha, to go and meet the ANC in exile, to agitate and orchestrate for a yes vote during the referendum, and then to continue to set up a business trust chaired by Sakima Kozoma at that time, just to address tourism and also what the new South Africa should look like, especially in education. That we worked with this government for 15 months to avoid a ratings agency downgrade. And we were winning, we avoided it in December. The economy was beginning to grow, GDP growth I'm talking about, by 2%. Then the president goes to do exactly the same things that the three rating agencies said we should not do. As if that's not enough, this 10-year project of corruption and state capture that has been going on unabated is now being deflected by racist terminology like white monopoly capital and radical economic transformation, when in essence the National Development Plan 2030 talks about inclusive economic growth. So we thought as business, we can't really boycott investing, we can't boycott creating small and medium enterprises, and we can't boycott educating our own future workforce. So today it was a fight back to say we've had enough. We are heavily invested in this economy. It is as much our country as it is civil society's country as it is politicians' country.
And some would say they would like business to invest more. They say they're sitting on 1.4 trillion rand that they could be spending in the economy, but they're not. Why is that?
So people who peddle those inflated fallacies are people who don't want to know the truth. Because if you think about it logically, when business is invested, the communities have money to spend on goods and services, the economy is growing, they make more money. So why would business hoard money? So for us, we are saying, moving forward, we are making a contract with South Africa that's very explicit. That says we want to continue to invest in this economy, but for us to invest, of course, we need regulatory certainty and policy stability. Sometimes it has taken 6 years for this ANC-led government to make just one decision. And one can make a number of examples around that in energy, in mining resources, Petroleum Development Act. 6 years later, we are still talking about it. So if we can get those things right, we'll continue to invest in SMMEs, in the communities where we have a presence, but also we'll continue to ensure that this notion of shared value is not only value for the shareholders, but to pay decent wages for our employees, so that our communities where employees come from. That's why we chose to launch it in Alexandra. We moved from prime real estate in Sandton across the bridge where our people work and say this is the squalor, the poor of the most poorest.
So you've got this contract with South Africa. There's a number of things that you'd like to see. When you look at jobs, we're sitting with an unemployment rate of 27.7%, the highest in a number of years. How are we likely to turn that around if the economy is not growing? We saw those poverty figures coming out yesterday, quite scary numbers. 55.5% of South Africans are in poverty. That's just from 2011 up until 2015.
It will be very difficult. We are the first one to admit, especially because we have scored our own goal by getting ourselves into a recession that we did not need, that we cannot afford, by going and inviting a rating agencies downgrade below such investment grade at the time that they'd only given us 5 things to fix. Fix our politics, fix our growth, manage your state-owned enterprises to make sure that there's good governance. Your legislative framework, just make sure that it is robust, and we go and do absolutely the opposite. In a recessionary period, it's difficult. 5 years, we have lost 92,000 jobs. In just this last month, we have announced that 15,000 jobs are going to be shared purely by the actions of our ministers. As business, we are now saying, even in this difficult environment, we already employ 13.5 million people of the 15 million that are gainfully employed. With the totality of government, maybe 2.2 million. We could have done more if labor, government and civil society come together. We have to pull ourselves by our own bootstraps out of this recession, because nobody is going to feel sorry for us. We have to do it.
You talk about corruption and the fact that it's a cancer eating away at society. The Gupta emails or the Gupta leaks that we've seen coming through over the past couple of weeks looks at how government and business have been working together to end up in corruption. We've seen the deals that have come through between government and business. There's corrupt dealings there. So it's not just the public sector or government that's found wanting. The business sector has also been found wanting. So what are you doing about that?
You're absolutely correct. That's why in fighting state capture, we've been very explicit to say wherever it occurs, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector, we are the first ones to say it's very embarrassing and unwarranted, especially because the laws in this country are very clear. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, Competitions Commission, the Anti-Bribery and Corruption Act, Gifts and Hospitality, all of those, Ethics and Compliance, and the Companies Act is very prescriptive about how business ought to conduct themselves. So when our own members are found to be the corruptors, of course, it is untenable. That's why today, along with a contract with South Africa, we then signed an integrity pledge, which is business's own oath of anti-corruption. And we are saying we are going to comply with all laws, with Competitions Commission. We are not going to embark in activities that are geared towards market allocation, price fixing, or even collusion. And if any of our members, starting from today, henceforth, choose not to comply with South Africa's own laws, then they choose not to be members of BLSA. We want to clean up our own house. We want to make sure that before we call the kettle black, that the port itself has put its own house in order.
So where to for South Africa? Business is saying #business believe. They feel that South Africa has a lot to give and we can get better. We've got a few points. Ratings agencies are looking at us. We've got the medium-term budget policy statement by the Minister of Finance expected in October, and then the December elective conference. When you look at those risks ahead, where do you see South Africa going?
A lot of headwinds, especially because our politicians are distracted by elective conference in December, but also as business, we've been meeting with this government at least once a quarter on 5 priorities to say when you enact laws and regulations, be aware of the unintended consequences. And all of us, let's work on this notion of inclusive economic growth, that we've been gifted with this amazing gift by our forebears of a united, non-racial, inclusive, constitutional democracy. And when we work with government, in partnership with Labour, with the South African Communist Party, and we put our shoulders to the wheel, there is no reason why we can't pull ourselves out of the hole we have dug ourselves into. And that's why today, as business, we're very clear to say, in spite of the difficulties, we are going to do our absolute best, especially if government does their bit, Labour partners with us, we can continue to invest so that when the tide comes up, it can lift all boats.
When the tide comes up, we're sitting in a technical recession. Things are expected to look better when it comes to GDP in the second quarter of the year. We've got the ratings agencies, like I say. When you look at the situation right now, could we possibly get a further ratings downgrade from the ratings agencies?
It's highly plausible. And let me make an example with state-owned enterprises. They raised only 3 things. They said, first, make sure that these are adequately capitalized. That number 2, they do what they're paid to do. In the case of Eskom, they embark on planned and preventative maintenance. And then lastly, that they just exercise good governance. Now, What this government has been doing in the past years is they are not looking at putting our best foot forward. In fact, those that are technical competent are the ones that they avoid. They were looking at cadre deployment, those people that know nothing about running those businesses. That's how we ended up with a mess of SABC, of Transnet, and now SAA. If we're to focus on fixing those, because we know what needs to be done, especially at the time that when Dr. Ruel Khoza was the chairman of ESCOM, it had a higher rating agency than Sovereign. But do you think they'll humble themselves and ask for advice from Dr. Ruel Khoza? No, because he's not one of the acolytes. He's not one of the people who get appointed at Saxonwold. So I think that's why today we are fighting back and say this needs to stop. Not in our name. We are heavily invested in this economy. It is our country, and we'll make sure that it doesn't go the rest of the stories of Africa.
Well, many thanks, Bonang Mohale, the Chief Executive of Business Leadership South Africa.